Today's topic is don't be an enabler, and we'll define that in a few minutes. And we're also going to look at Galatians chapter 6 to kind of help us unpack that a little bit more. But it's in regard to helping people, and it can be really hard to discern when to help someone. And sometimes our helping is actually hurting, and that's what we're going to talk about today. And perhaps you guys already have some examples in your mind of times that you've really been in a situation where you were so conflicted on, do I help this person? When is my helping helpful? And when is my help not actually helping, and it may even be hurting the person? So let's look at our text from Galatians chapter 6 and see what Paul has to say about the appropriate times to help. He says, starting in verse 2, share each other's troubles and problems, and in this way obey the law of Christ. And goes on in verse 5 to say, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. So what Paul seems to be highlighting is that we should share the burdens of people's troubles and problems. When crises come along, we as Christ followers who, the ultimate law of Christ is to love as he has loved us, that if people are in trouble or have a problem, we should come alongside them and help them carry that burden. But there is a difference of helping people who are responsible for their own conduct or own behavior or their own character. And that's where we need to start separating out helpful helping and hurtful helping. So here's the bottom line. We should care for others in times of momentary struggle. However, each person is responsible for their own choices and behaviors. That's kind of another way of talking about conduct. So, like I said, it's always beneficial to help people that have a crisis or a situation, a financial stress, a health crisis, whatever that is. Yes, as Christ followers, we should come alongside people to help. But we are not responsible for people's choices and their behaviors. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, how do you go from being a helper to more of an enabler? Well, let me define enabler so we can differentiate. An enabler is someone who rescues someone from the consequences of their choices and mistakes, it for an act of love. Let me say that again. An enabler is someone who rescues someone from the consequences of their choices and mistakes it for an act of love. Again, maybe you can look at your own life and see where maybe there's been times that you've thought you were being a helper, but in the end you were an enabler because you were trying to protect a loved one, rescuing them from the natural consequences that they really should pay the price in order to learn why those choices are not good or healthy for them. And the problem with the enabler is you think that you're being loving in protecting someone or rescuing them. But the reality is God uses the consequences, the natural consequences that come with our choices as a way of teaching us and shaping us. So if we step in and take that opportunity of learning away, that's when our helping actually hurts. So here's a few signs if you might be an enabler. First, if you allow destructive patterns to continue without consequence. So let's take an addiction of sorts. If it's drinking or drugs, if you allow that person to just continue to use freely without ever calling them out or saying you need to leave or you need to go get treatment right away. Another thing is if you make excuses for unhealthy behavior. Let's say that if it's an addict in your life and they get very angry then when they're coming off of their high and you make excuses to the kids, daddy or mommy, they're stressed at work, they haven't been feeling well. You're just making all sorts of excuses to hide the truth. And then the last thing is you shield them from natural consequences. You step in and maybe take the blame for situations. Or again, you make excuses or you protect them from a consequence that they really should have had. And sometimes you put yourself in harm's way in order to accomplish that. Those are all signs that you might be an enabler. And you really should pay attention to that because, again, the godly approach is to be a helper in times of momentary struggle, but not to come in and try and rescue people who need to take responsibility for their own choices and behaviors, their own conduct. So this can be kind of a hard topic. I hope you take some time to answer these questions in the Talk About It section and really reflect on this if you have become an enabler to some people in your life.